And some of you were here on time and have been waiting around. So, good morning, everybody. This is the last day we'll have class in April. Friday starts May 1st. Since there's only 30 days in April, tomorrow's the last day of April. In Minnesota, getting to May is a big deal because obviously we've been through the winter and the snow and the cold days of spring, but when you get to May, you're pretty confident that it's going to be warm now. And we had a beautiful, lots of beautiful weather this week. And also May is when people can start planting their gardens and going out to the, if any of you know anything about golfing, our golf courses are open now, so it's a big time in Minnesota. In Sweden, if any of you know where Sweden is, they're farther north, more even with Canada. So there's a lot of cold weather and short days in Sweden. That's dark a lot during the winter. And in Sweden, May 1st is actually a holiday where they celebrate the coming of spring. It's such a big deal there. So Friday will be May Day. And if you ever hear anybody talking about May Day, that's what May 1st is called. And some people here will talk about it in the US besides just in Sweden. But they have a lot of traditions to celebrate the end of the cold and the end of the snow. So we're gonna be working on, I wanna pull up the schedule here to remind everybody. We're gonna be working on Unit 5, which is chapters 9 and 10. And I have to switch folders here because I'm still in my reading folder. And that test is going to be 2 weeks from today. So we're going to work on Unit 5 today and next week. I'm opening up the schedule here so you can see it. So here's our schedule. We're in the orange day, April 29. We did our test, which I have not graded yet. James, those of you who have been getting on, James asked me about checking the notes to make sure I can see everybody's notes. So I'll double check that and make sure. Hopefully if you took your notes on a sheet of paper, you still have it and you didn't throw it away in case I need you to submit it again or take a new picture that's more clear. But this week, the rest of this week, the weekend and next week, we're going to be working on Unit 5. And then our Unit 5 test is going to be on Wednesday, 2 weeks from today. So it'll be just the same as the test we just finished. We'll have time to meet at 10:35 and go over the instructions. And then the rest of the day, the test will be open for you to take it. It will have a lecture, just like you did for the test on Monday. And it will have questions about the Unit 5 vocabulary and questions about the Unit 5 skills, but it will not cover the whole book. It's not even though we're doing the test during the final exam week, it's not a final exam. Good morning, Abdi.
Good morning.
So that's the update about the calendar and what's going on. It's hard to believe that we only have 2 weeks left. But if I think about January, when I first saw all of you at the beginning of the semester, it feels like a long time ago. A lot has happened this semester. There's a lot of people talking about and joking about that 2020 is going to be a famous year in history because of the pandemic.
That's true.
And everybody's life is weird. Everybody's jobs and school are weird. It's not just school that's online. My husband's working online at home. My son's an engineer and he's at home working, not going to the office. My other son is a coach. And so he's meeting with all his students online for meetings with the coach, so they can't even have practice for his sport right now. So they're just meeting online, and the guys he coaches are doing all their own exercises and conditioning on their own as an individual, not with the team. So there's a lot of really strange things happening right now. Obviously, some of you are still going to work. And I know some of you are even more busy than normal because of your work. And then some of you are not going to work and you don't have anything to do but your classes. So it's different for everybody. But it's a lot, and we're going to get to the end. 2 weeks left. We can make it to the end. That final week, I forgot to point that out. When we have our final test on Wednesday, I do not see you on Monday that week. Monday the 11th, we won't have anything because during final exams, we don't have any class schedule. That's why it's called the final exam schedule. Why didn't that keep? We don't have a class schedule during the final exam week. It's just whatever you have scheduled with each teacher. And it depends on who your teacher is and what their schedule is. Some teachers are doing finals, some teachers are doing unit tests, some teachers are doing something completely different. So this statement is already old because we already know that we're finishing online now. They've already announced at the school that we're not coming back to school this semester, so I put that up there at the end of March, so a whole month ago, and now we know the answer. So we'll finish the semester online. So any questions about the schedule or what's going on with that?
Do you have some update about the financial, the scholarship?
I had one student tell me that Christine told them we don't have it, but I don't know if that's the official decision that we aren't getting the scholarships or if it just means they haven't told us yet that we have scholarships. So I need to look into that. I can put an update in the D2L announcement for today.
Perfect.
That's a good question because now, you know, summer starts in 4 weeks from yesterday, the summer classes. So people need to know, obviously, if they're going to have that. So I will write to Mr. Smith. He's the one that's talking to the people about the scholarships. He has not sent us an update. So I assume that means we don't have a decision. I think if we got a decision, he would send us an update. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. But I will find out and put it in the announcement for today so you don't have to wait till next week.
Sure.
In fact, I need to write that on a piece of paper somewhere here.
Teacher.
I'll write it down so I don't forget because I have a lot of stuff I'm doing. The tests, not everybody got in to take the test. I know one of the students for sure is going to take it later today. The other students I'm reaching out to figure out when they're going to take it. I'm telling them they have to take it this week because I'm going to grade them this weekend. So by Monday, you should be able to see your tests, but you should see your grade either on Friday or Saturday. The grade will go into D2L. And hopefully you felt like the test this time was easier than the first time you tried to do it online. You know, some of you had a test with me in reading before you did the test in listening, so it wasn't your first time doing the online test. But some of you, I think it was your first time. So hopefully this time it was a little easier, and hopefully everything worked with the video and the note-taking. I did tell James I was going to open this. I got in my D2L now.
Teacher, there is a date limit for the payment for the summer class.
The only part I heard, Boris, was payment for the summer class. What was the first part of your question?
There is a date limit for the payment.
A deadline
No, the limit day.
The
for
limit.
financial
Day.
aid?
Yeah.
I don't know about that stuff very much. I mostly only know about doing my classes. I don't know that much about the financial aid part. You can reach out to Peter. He might know about that. He's in his Zoom room every day until 4:30 and then Friday until 2:30. So if you know how you get into my room through the website, you can go into Peter's room anytime during the day and he'll be there. So I tell students it's just like if you were going to walk into his office to go see him. If you get on Zoom, he's on his computer and can answer you about that. So I don't want to give answers about financial aid because they might be the wrong answer.
Yeah.
I don't have very much involvement with financial aid, so I know some things. Most of what I know about financial aid is because I had 4 kids who went to college and I did financial aid for them. So I did a lot of FAFSA forms and I know some about that. But specifically for summer, I'm not so sure about that. So check with Peter, or Christine would also know if you want to. Or you can contact the financial aid office. My understanding is that there's some grant money for summer if you take, Abdi, I think you talked to me about this. You need 6 credits.
Yeah.
For summer if you want financial aid. And then also with the scholarships, the scholarships are only, the scholarships we've been talking about are only for ESOL classes. So if you're taking a different class in math or accounting or some other department for your program, you cannot get a scholarship from us for that. Our scholarships are just to help students. And the reason we do it is because obviously if you don't take any classes all summer, you're gonna start, your English is gonna start declining a little bit unless you use it a lot at work or at home. And so we put in this request for the scholarships from the school a few years ago. I think we've been doing it 3 summers, so this would be our 4th summer, to try and help students be able to afford to continue studying in the summer so their English can keep progressing and getting stronger. So that's why we did this. It's a little bit different than for regular students in other programs. And so that's why we've been doing this. But because of the crisis with the pandemic, we don't know if all the scholarship money is available. So that's what we've been waiting to find out about this summer. They were supposed to tell us in February, and then they didn't decide in February. And then of course, by the time we got back after spring break in March, everything was crazy. So now they're taking longer to decide than if it was just a normal semester. So that's the deal with the finances and the scholarships. But yeah, summer starts in 4 weeks. So I need to get that information for you right away so that I can update it, or at least tell you what to do about it. The regular scholarships for fall, those applications are now due May 15th. They postponed that to help students who are switching to online classes and working extra and possibly sick. I mean, I've had some sick students. On Abdi, and I have 2 other students who asked me for recommendations. That's on my list for Friday. I don't have any Friday classes, so I make a list of the work I need to do Friday. So grading your test and doing scholarship letters is on my Friday schedule. So that will be going out this weekend. Any questions about the calendar besides what I just talked about?
I think no.
So just to review, Class next week on Unit 7. No class Monday, May 11th. And then our test is Wednesday, May 13th. So we've just got, in 2 weeks from today will be our final test, and then we'll be done. I did not put it on here, but grades are due on May 18th, so the Monday after the semester ends. So my last test is on Thursday, the 14th, and then by the 18th, I have to have all the grading done. So if you're interested or concerned about finding out your grade, that's the schedule for that. Okay, so we're gonna get back to our new unit. Oh, I didn't finish opening the D2L thing. So I have note taking from 16 people, it looks like. Hopefully before you uploaded the picture of your notes, you could see if the picture was clear or not. James, I do have yours. And there are 19 in the class. Edo has quit coming, so I don't think he's taking the test. I'm trying to think who else missed. Yeah, I can read them, James. Your picture looks fine.
That's good.
Yeah, that is good. So I'm gonna open the quiz, and I'm guessing there's gonna be 16 people who took the quiz if I have 16 note-taking submissions. Yeah, so I have 16 people on the test and 16 people whose notes are there. So that's a good sign. My other class that did it yesterday, I had 15 people take the test and only 13 notes. So I had to email a couple people and tell them I need your notes. I need to think about who didn't take this. So Ibrahim, I know, didn't take it, but I've been emailing with him, and Edo didn't take it. Who else is missing? Should be 3 people missing because there's 19 in the class. Oh. Let's see. Oh, Oseas is taking it today. So he's the one that I told you one student's doing it today. So Oseas is doing it today. Ibrahim and Edo, I don't know if they're gonna do it because they haven't been coming to class. So I don't know if they're coming back and trying to finish. Okay, so Unit 5. This is on page 106. It's gonna be kind of quick because we've gotta finish basically 2 chapters in 2 weeks, which is quicker than we've been doing the other chapters, but because it's similar activities that we've always done, I know that everybody can go more quickly now than at the beginning. So this is a little cartoon, we call it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cartoon is a drawing, but it also means it's kind of a joke.
Which
And
page
this is a
number?
dad talking to his younger son, maybe a middle school age son. And he says, "Is everything all right, Jeffrey?" The boy's name must be Jeffrey. "You never call me dude anymore."
Can you tell me the page number?
Yes, 106, 106. So this is a joke about the son calling his dad dude instead of dad. Dude is kind of slang for a guy.
Yeah.
If you've heard somebody say, "Hey dude, how's it going?" or whatever, that just means, "Hey man." And so the son normally uses slang with his dad, but he isn't using it now. He says, "You never call me dude anymore." And so the dad is interpreting that to mean something's bothering the son. He's sad or upset about something. So that's kind of the joke, that he's not using his slang. So I want to give you a few minutes in breakout rooms to talk about these questions. Hopefully you all know what slang is. You all have slang in your own language. So slang is just words that we use for a certain meaning, but they're not this what we call standard English. Standard English is what you would find in a regular dictionary. We do have slang dictionaries now. So you could find the meaning of some of the slang words in a slang dictionary, but it's not considered standard English. It's not the kind of English we use in writing. It's for conversation, and it's considered very informal. And so the question here is, why do people use slang, and is it necessary? Does every language have slang in it? Give some examples of slang from your language. And slang is not the same as a swear word. So just so you're clear, we have swear words or curse words or whatever you want to call it in languages. But when we're asking for examples of slang, we're not talking about curse words. We're talking about slang words. And do you use slang, and do you know much slang in English? And then in what context or what situations do you use slang? And so I'll give you an example for number 5 to give you an idea what they're talking about. This was many years ago, so it's a student that's long gone. You don't know this person because they don't come to Century anymore. But I was in class, and we were working on an assignment, and one of the students looked up at me and said, "Hey, dude," to try and get my attention to come over and help him. And I didn't really say anything. I just kind of looked at the student, but all the other students were like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe you just called the teacher dude. Like, that's not respectful. That's not considered proper, right?" So that's just an example of what they're talking about in number 5 about what situation would it be appropriate to use those slang words. And you may not think it's appropriate for a child to call their father dude either, because that's meant to be a informal address and not respectful address. So I'm going to see if I can pop up these break rooms here and get everybody into a room. And as usual, I will try and put you in the rooms where you sit, but that might not be totally possible depending on who's here today and who's absent today. So the first table, I always remember the you 4 girls that sit together. And Adam, you always sit with Caesar, but he's not here, so I'm gonna have to put you with somebody else today. Sunny, I'll put you 3 guys together. And James, I can't tell which one is your phone and which one is your computer, so I'm gonna put both of yours in the same room.
Okay.
I'm gonna put all the girls together in one room because we have 5 girls, and then I'm gonna have 2 rooms of guys. So when I push the breakout rooms, it's gonna give you a little box that says join your group. For sure, turn on your microphone so you can talk, because everybody needs to talk about these questions. But if possible, turn on your video. You might not want to, and that's fine. But it's much easier to have a conversation if you can see the person you're talking to, okay? And answer these 5 questions on page 106 about slang and what are some of your thoughts about slang. I don't think we have enough time for everybody to talk about all 5 questions to have each person, because the groups are 4 or 5 people right now, which is kind of big, but I think it's okay. but at least you have to talk about one of the questions. So for sure, at some point during the breakout time, everybody needs to talk. And if somebody's not talking, then someone else in your group needs to call on them. So we use a strategy for discussion where you'll say something like, so John, what do you think about slang, or something like that, to make sure everybody has a turn to talk. When you're done in about 5, I'll probably give you about 7 or 8 minutes, so a couple minutes for each question. I'll pull you back into the main room, so you can just wait there until I pull everybody back. Okay? Anybody have a question, or do you know what to do now? I hope so. Okay, I'm sending you out to your rooms, and I'll pull you back in about 10 minutes. You need to push on the join button when it comes up on your screen. And James, I put both your computer and your phone in, so you can join with one if you want, or both if you want. Sunny, are you there? Can you join your group? You're with Joe and Lee Cheng.
Oh, yeah.
You just need to click on the join button. It should come up on your screen. You guys are done?
Yes.
Okay. I'm pulling everybody back in a couple minutes, so you can just hang out and you can keep chatting if you want. Okay, everybody's coming back. I forgot to pause the recording. So that means there's going to be a long 10-minute break on the recording, but whoever's listening to it can just skip it. So slang is a very interesting topic. It's something that a lot of, we have a couple more people coming back. Still, I'll wait. Okay. it's a thing that a lot of language learners think about because the more slang that you know and use, the more you can sound like a native speaker. So especially with people who came in high school or college or young adults, middle-aged and older people don't care so much about slang because slang is always changing. The slang that we use when we were young adults or in college isn't used anymore, right? Each generation kind of makes their own slang. And so the people I think that care the most about the slang are the young people and the teenagers. So I know some of my students are often coming to me and saying, you know, what does this word mean? Or they want to learn some of the new slang expressions so that they sound more like US teenagers. But I just wanted to look specifically at number 5. I'm not going to worry about 2 and 3 because I'm pretty sure the answer for number 2 is yes, right? Every language has some slang words
Yeah.
that either they're common words used with a different meaning in slang, or it's an actual new word. And they're going to talk about it in the lecture that we're going to listen to for this chapter. They're going to talk about slang and how it's created and why it's created. But I just want to talk very quickly with all of you about number 5. What did you think about number 5? I kind of gave an example already, but what kind of thoughts did you have about when is slang appropriate or not appropriate?
We can say it's not appropriate with all the people and the parents.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's appropriate with the friends, with your peers.
Yeah, so it is about informalness. It's considered more informal than even just casual speech. So as Abdi was saying, sometimes with older people, it's not respectful. Sometimes with parents. What other situation can you think of? How about with somebody like your boss? Would you want to use slang with your boss?
No.
Boss and professor, and then seniors.
Okay.
Like the grandmother.
Yeah.
Yes,
And the thing
yeah.
about slang with grandparents, even with parents,
They don't understand.
yeah, they won't understand because as I was saying, the words that were used in the other generation are not the words that the new generation is using. So if you use your slang with your parents or grandparents, they won't understand what it means.
Yeah.
Although I said something to my son last night and he said, well, you wouldn't know that if you didn't have teenagers around for so many years. Because of my kids' ages, I had teenagers at home for over 15 years. So between them and their friends, I did hear some of their slang things that I know how to use. But any other ideas that somebody has?
About what? Question 5?
Yeah. I would say it's not appropriate probably in business, for example.
Yeah.
I don't know that many of you or any of you might be working in business, but when you get a career and you're an accountant and you go to meet with a client or someone who's using your accounting services, you don't want to be talking slang to that person because it's not really considered professional because it's so casual. It's not good for work. Same with like if you're going to the bank to do business or you're going to the doctor for an appointment, most people wouldn't use slang in those kind of situations where you're talking to a professional person or a lawyer. So those are just some examples. The other interesting thing can be, Abdi talked about and Nehemiah talked about, you don't want to use slang with the older people, but it's also weird for the older people to use slang with the younger people. So an example of this is my kids went to the same high school here in Shoreview. And they had one teacher that a couple of my kids both had, and she wanted to be popular with the students and have the students like her. And so she would use the slang of the students all the time. So even though she was in her 40s, probably, maybe even older than 40s, she wanted to talk like the teenagers so that they would think she was popular and up to date and friendly with them.
Yeah,
they
that's
hated
what,
it.
yeah, maybe.
They didn't want to hear a 50-year-old woman using their teenager slang words. It sounded very weird to them. They felt like it was not appropriate for her to talk like that as a teacher. And like I said, it's not swearing. It's not like bad language. But they would come home and laugh at this teacher and say she sounded ridiculous because she was 50 and she was trying to talk like a 16-year-old. So it goes both ways. You know, the young people that don't want to use their slang with the older people, and the older people should not be trying to use the younger people's slang. And the reason that is, we'll find out in our lecture. But one of the reasons that kids use slang is to have a group identity. So the people who use that slang kind of belong with each other in the same generation, in the same group, in the same high school. And that's why it doesn't work for an older person, because they don't belong in that group. And so my son and daughter who were students thought it was very weird to have someone not in their group using the slang from their group. So on the next page, we're not going to take time to read this right now, but this is the reading, and it's called Get Your Own Slang, and that's kind of what this is talking about, that it's only appropriate to use the slang for your own generation, for your own group, instead of someone else. So here's a little conversation with a couple teenagers. And you may or may not know what any of these words mean, but this is a real conversation from Missouri, which is south of Minnesota. So it's more southern, what we call southern talk. So this may be true in your country as well. I'm sure it's true in big countries like China and Russia, but even in a big country like US or Canada, different areas of the country have different language. They have used different slang, they have different accents, they have different vocabulary. And we call that regional, meaning of that region, that geographic region. Like my daughter went to school in Illinois for college. And does everybody know what a drinking fountain is, or a water fountain? Has everybody heard of that? We had one right outside the door of the ESL department at Century. Water fountain is where you can go get a drink of water, right? And when she went to college in Illinois, all the people in Illinois call that a bubbler. The water fountain is called a bubbler. So that's an example of a slang word. It's not like a bad word or any kind of bad language, but it's a specific name that they use to refer to something that's not the standard name. It's not what that was actually called originally. And of course they call it a bubbler because the water bubbles up out of the spout. But she kept having people ask her about a bubbler and she didn't know what that meant. So this is just an example of some words, and you can read this over. We're going to work on this over the weekend.
No, yo vi los videos yo vi que se echaron toda la torta encima.
I'm muting everybody because of the talking. It's not a big deal if I hear noise, but I'm recording, so I don't want a lot of background noise. So I just muted everybody. If you want to talk, you need to unmute yourself. So this I want you to read over the weekend. We're not going to go through it together, but I do want to go through the vocabulary together so that you can get an introduction to these words, because this weekend you're already going to be listening to the new lecture. So this is on page 108 These two questions at the top under letter C, those are about the reading. So you can look over those after you do the reading. But what I want to focus on right now is D and E. So the first word is casual. And even though it has an S in the middle, it sounds like zh, casual. And casual means the same as informal. So it's really confusing for students that they have both those words on this list. 1 and 3, both are synonyms, or I would call them synonyms. But number 1, the meaning of casual is C. So if you're having a casual dinner, that means it's a relaxed and friendly dinner. You're not in a rush. You don't have to eat quickly and get off somewhere, somewhere to an event, for example. And informal is G, which is the opposite of formal. So we have this little prefix IN, and we put it on words like inaccurate or incorrect or incomplete, and that means not. So literally this word means not formal. So that's why they put the definition as the opposite of formal. And casual is also not formal, because if you're having a relaxed and friendly meeting, it's not a formal atmosphere or a formal situation. So those are a little bit confusing, but hopefully that'll be clear enough. And usually when I do the vocabulary sentences, I usually just have a sentence for one of those words because they can be used. We say they're interchangeable, which means you can switch those words for each other without changing the meaning of the sentence. Number 2, offensive is E. Something that's offensive and it is insulting, or if you know the word offend, if you offend somebody, that's the same word in a different form. So offend is the verb and offensive is the adjective form. So yeah, I should put the parts of speech on here. Casual is an adjective and offensive is an adjective. So something is offensive if it's unpleasant or insulting. So you may have heard someone use the expression offensive language. So if you are using words that are actually considered bad words or swear words, any of you who went to US high schools know what that means, because swear words are usually banned or against the rules in US high schools. So whenever kids said those words, they'd get in trouble. And again, that's not the same as slang. The bad words or offensive words that people say, that's not the same as slang. Slang is not considered offensive. We already talked about 3. Number 4, expressions is a noun. And that's for F, a group of words that go together. So if I got on in the beginning of class and I said, "How you doing?" That's kind of a slang expression because it's a reduced. Instead of saying, "How are you doing?" we say, "How you doing?" That's a reduced phrase. So that's an expression because it's a phrase that we use commonly. Number 5, identity. And those of you in my reading class this morning, we just had identity on our reading vocabulary list also. So that's a coincidence that those are on both lists, but that's D. So the quality of a group that makes that group different from other groups. So when you're talking about groups, they're talking about a group like maybe middle school kids or teenage kids, or young adults have a different identity than middle adults, middle-aged adults, or older adults. And those are the qualities of that group. And part of those qualities that make the group unique is the language that they use. So that's why it comes up in this lecture is part of the identity of a teenager could be the way they speak. It could be the way they dress or do their hair. So for example, I wouldn't wear the same clothes that my 24-year-old daughter would wear because it's not part of my identity or my age group or my generation. They have their own style and their own things they would wear. That is a noun. It comes from the verb identify. So you can identify a group by these qualities that make them different, and we call that their identity. Number 6 is pronounced relevant. That's letter A, connected to or related to something. I think we already had this word earlier in another chapter, but it comes up again now, and that's an adjective. And then this last word, peer, which Abdi already used when he was talking about when is slang appropriate. He said it's appropriate with your peer, and that's B, a person of the same age or in the same type of job. So when we're at school, your peers are the other students. My peers are the other teachers, right? When you're at your work, all your coworkers are your peers, but the boss or the manager is not your peer. They're at a different level or a different type of job. Your peers with people who are your same age. So that's kind of a generational thing between the generations. And it's very different because you might be a peer with students who are much younger than you are, but when you're at home in your family or with your friends, your peers are your same age. But if you're a peer at a school or at a job, you might not be the same age. So there's kind of different categories for peers. And then the last phrase for letter E is in style. That means this one. Letter C, fashionable. So we talk about things being in style when we talk about hair or clothing or shoes. And in style just means what is the most popular style at that time. So the example, they're talking about the 50s and the 60s. And those of you, I'm guessing no one in this class except me was alive in the 50s and 60s. But if you look it up, and look at the pictures of what the difference is between a 50s hairstyle and a 60s hairstyle. Oh, what they're showing me is the musicians' hairstyles, which is not the common hairstyle for, let me, it's kind of interesting because the styles go back around. Because when I look up what's called a crew cut, which is what they had when I was a girl, I'll show you the screen. This is kind of, these are just pictures I'm finding on Google, so it's kind of funny, but this is what they call the crew cut. If you can see this guy here, his hair's all buzzed off. Here's another one. This was a common haircut in the 50s, but when I put in hairstyles of the 50s, they gave me the long hairstyles that people like Elvis Presley and the famous musicians had. So then when I put in crew cut, I got these pictures, which are very modern hairstyles. These are all modern guys because this style is back. So this is a very common haircut that you'll see guys have right now. But in the 60s, in the 60s, men wore their hair really long. So even though there were still a lot of people with haircuts, there were people that had hair like this in the 60s, like this guy. So they had really long hair back then. So that's what that statement is talking about. So the style between the long and short hair keeps going around and around, and the same with the fashion styles. So those are all the words. Are there any questions on those? In style is an adjective. I didn't put that in there yet. So it's describing the hair was in style, meaning it was fashionable. It was not out. We say in style and out of style. The opposite means out of style, the opposite expression. So in style is an expression because it's more than one word and it's a phrase that has a certain meaning. And then the opposite, the one we use that's opposite, we say is out of style, which means it's not in fashion anymore. So the long hairstyles that people had in the 60s are not in fashion right now. So any questions on those words? So this is half the list. This is chapter 9. So unit 5 has chapters 9 and 10. Next week we'll be looking at unit 10. I am going to go ahead and put up the vocabulary websites if you want to start practicing those. We have 2 weeks till the test, so that should be plenty of time. And usually I put it up a week ahead, but I want to put it up a little bit early to make sure. So everybody's muted, so if you have a question, you have to unmute yourself, but I'm getting the impression there are no questions. Okay, then we're just going to look quickly at the lecture language strategy. And this one is a little bit unusual because it's not giving you a signal of words, it's giving you a signal in pronunciation. And the last chapter, we talked about the signal words that show important information, right? Trying to get the book lined up right. That show important information. And this is another signal that's used to show important information. So they're emphasizing or clarifying a word or idea, and they do it through pronunciation. So it's not going to be signal words, it's going to be a description of what's happening with the professor's voice and words that are a signal to you to pay attention. So it says professors often change the tone. Tone means what their voice sounds like, or the pronunciation to emphasize or clarify a word or idea. Recognizing this signals can help you catch important points more effectively. So here's just a list of some of the things that professors do when they want to stress a certain point or a certain word. So one thing they'll do is they'll say the word more loudly. So we do this in conversation all the time too, if you want to stress a word. So, you know, if someone says, can you call me? Or can you talk, can we have lunch after class? You might say to them, well, I have to go later. And you'll say the word later stronger because you're emphasizing the fact that you can't go right after class. Maybe you have to talk to the teacher and then you're going to go later after that. Or slowly. So if a professor wants to make sure that you understand one of the words that they're saying, they're going to say it more slowly. So their speech will slow down to make sure you catch the word, to make sure that it's clearly spoken, but also to make sure that you have enough time to write it down. So anything that's emphasized with these signals or the signal words we learned in chapter 7, it's because the important information needs to go in your notes. They need to, you need to make sure that you write down the important information that the speaker is stressing. And then the other thing we do is pitch. Pitch is a word for baseball. So anybody who watches baseball uses this verb because in baseball you pitch a ball. When they throw the ball to the batter, that's called a pitch. But this is talking about sound. If you know about music, we have pitches. And pitch is a high tone or a low tone. So the speaker might emphasize a word with a higher tone. So I might say something to you like, we're going to have a test in 2 weeks. And if you listen to the word test, it's higher than I was saying my other words. I'll say it again. We're going to have our test in 2 weeks. So it's a way of me emphasizing and getting your attention, because obviously when I say test, usually the students pay attention because they know that's the important thing that's coming up, right? And then the other signals under the second list are for signals that emphasize a group of words. So this could be a whole phrase or an expression. So when I was talking about the expression over here, I said that when you say in style or out of style, I was slowing down and clearly speaking each of those words. So here's the tips for that: slowing down for a group of words, which is what I just said. Pausing before saying an important group of words. So a professor might pause for a brief second and not say anything before they introduce an important phrase. And the pause really is almost unnoticeable, but it gets your attention. Because whenever someone's speaking and they stop speaking, your brain immediately thinks, why did they stop? What's going on? Why are they stopping? And it focuses your mind on what they're saying in order to hear the important group of words that's coming next. And then pronouncing each word separately or giving each word special emphasis. So that's similar to what I was doing when I'm talking about slowing down. If you say each word separately, meaning there's a short separation between each word, that's one way to slow down your speech. It's also a way to emphasize each word individually. So when I said out of style, when I speak normally, I would say that's out of style. I would say it quickly and it would all run together like that, out of style. So out of would turn into one word, right? Out of style. But when I'm trying to explain it to you in a clear way for vocabulary work, I would say it's out of style. We say it's in style and it's out of style. And I'm trying to emphasize each word so that you catch the words that are in the phrase. If I said to you it's out of style, you wouldn't know what words those are because I'm not pronouncing them clearly. So any questions on this skill? It's something we do naturally in conversation, so it won't be that new, but it's something that we do in conversation without thinking about it. So it may seem like a weird or new idea, but it's not new because you do it all the time when you're talking with people. If you're talking to a child and you say to them, sit down, sit down, sit down, and they don't sit down and you want to emphasize it, you go sit down, right? You emphasize each individual word and you put separation between the words. Don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that, right? We do that all the time when we're speaking, not just with children, we do it with each other too. So when you hear it in the lecture, you'll notice it more than you may think because it's not unusual. So does this make sense? Do you have questions?
Nope, I don't have a question.
So we're going to listen to this example quickly. I want to try and be done close to noon or a little after noon if possible, so that you have a break before, if you have grammar class today. I don't know how many of you have grammar class today, but I know Abdi doesn't because he's in my grammar class tomorrow, but yeah, we have the best grammar class, don't we, Abdi?
Yep, we are.
I'm just kidding. We do have a good group of students, though. I'm sure every teacher thinks their classes are the best.
You mean in listening class don't have a good group?
No, we do.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about comparing grammar classes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I was just looking.
yeah. Okay, I need to figure out. It says listen to the brief lecture, but the lecture I have, oh, okay, it's the same lecture. So we're going to listen to this short recording under letter J.
Yeah.
And all I need you to do right now is listen for the content. So you're going to match the first part of the sentence about teenagers and parents and slang with the second part of the sentence on the right-hand side of the book. So in order for you to hear this, I need to share my screen again here. So if everybody's on page 109, we're going to do letter J. And this is the recording. It's just a minute and a half or so. It's short. So you have to match 1, 2, and 3 with the A, B, and C. And I'm gonna mute everybody again just so that you don't have any trouble hearing the recording. And then at the end, I'll take questions if you have questions.
Morning. I want to pick up right where we left off the other day. We were talking about slang and about ways that.
Can you all hear him okay? Oh, you're all muted.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you can't, my volume is 100%. So if you can't hear, you need to turn it up on your own device. So on your phone or your computer, you can turn up the volume if you're having trouble hearing. Oh, it turns out this is about 3 minutes. It's longer than I thought. I just saw the time pop up. Okay, I'm starting at the beginning again.
I want to pick up right where we left off the other day. We were talking about slang and about ways that different people, different groups use slang, right? Okay. Now, for today, I want to spend some time looking at the ways young people, teenagers, use slang. So,
did you hear that? Young people. That was the stress. It was higher and it was louder.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about kids who are approximately 14 to 18 years old. Let me begin by saying that there are some language experts today who believe that today's teenagers have the most creative slang we have ever seen in the English language. The words, the expressions they invent are so unusual and interesting for us to study. Now this is extremely important. The research shows us that they don't forget how to speak standard English. They can do both. They can use all kinds of slang and speak standard English. We need to keep that in mind. That they can use slang and then switch to more formal English, and then they can switch again and use all kinds of technical language. For example, language to talk about computers or something they've studied, and on and on. You get the idea. In other words, they know when to use slang and when not to use it. Now, some parents of teenagers worry that they worry when they hear their children use slang. They worry that their language is too informal or that other people won't understand them. They're also afraid that other people will think that their kids don't know how to speak English properly. We hear this all the time. But it's important to know that most experts on language use aren't worried about today's teenagers, and I share their view. Today's teenagers are creative and very smart speakers of English. They pick up a lot of slang from each other, and of course, they pick up the slang that's in style from the internet, TV, movies, music, etc. For teenagers, slang is a way of using language to describe and discuss shared experiences of growing up today. But I tend to think slang is their special way of playing with the language, being creative and expressing themselves. In this way, it can even be a sort of poetry.
Okay, so what did you think for number one? Teenagers today,
C.
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 it should be C, yeah. They say that the studies show that teenagers today have the most creative language ideas.
Yes.
Parents of teenagers
A.
A.
worry
Or,
about the teenager
teenager
slang.
slang.
So any of you who might have older kids, you might feel like they aren't speaking proper English and it's not a good idea, but he's saying that the research shows that students can still switch back to proper English when they're in school or when they need to. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, if you have teenagers living in your home, either brothers and sisters or kids. They'll talk to you in a certain way, and then when they get on the phone with their friends, it sounds like they're talking a whole different kind of English, right? And then 3, slang is a way to have fun. So that one should be B.
Yep.
It's not just about fun though, it's also about identity, and that's gonna come up in our lecture this weekend. So I want you to do both this lecture again and the main lecture video for this weekend, because we need to try and get through as much of chapter 9 as we can. So you did J, but letter K is also about the same lecture you just heard. And this time they want you to be listening for the signals. So they want you to find the 6 groups of words that he stressed, or a word or a group of words. So the first one I pointed out to you when he said young people, and I'm going to look quick and make sure that is the first one before I tell you it's the first one. So yeah, the very first one is the one I paused at, where he says young people, because he wants to stress that he's not talking about the whole population. He's talking about a certain age group, which he later on tells us is teenagers, but he's only counting 14 to 18-year-olds, even though teenagers go from 13 to 19. And so then they want you to put a letter for what's the pronunciation signal. Is it a louder word, a slower speech, a higher pitch, or a pause? And those are the letters you're going to write on this little line. So first they want you to write the group of words or the word that he stressed, and then what were the signals that he used for that. So it's the same lecture we just heard. That's why it says listen to the lecture again. So I'm going to put up that recording, and you can listen to it as many times as you want to try and hear some of these stress things. And then the regular lecture about slang is page 112. And they do not have a place in the book for you to write notes, so that you can just write them on a piece of paper. I don't think I'm going to collect these, but I think I'll collect the ones from, obviously I'll grade the ones from your test, and I'll this weekend, and then next week I'll grade the ones from chapter 10 so that you have some more feedback before the final test about your note taking. This is a example of note taking. So they take this paragraph and they want to remind you that this is the main idea, and these 3 indented ideas are the supporting ideas. Notice that they don't stick out as far as the main idea. So this is something also that you need to do when you take notes, is mark what idea is the main idea and what ideas are the supporting details, just like you would in an outline or a paragraph. So once I put up the video, I'll want you to take notes and then answer these questions. And the purpose of the questions is to see how good your notes are. So if you take notes and then you can answer all these questions from your notes, that means you got all the important information into your notes. But if you take your notes and try to answer these questions and you don't have all the answers, so for number 2, for example, why do people use slang? If you don't have any information in your notes about why people use slang, then that means you missed that important point in the lecture. So that's the whole reason that they give you these questions and they tell you to use your notes when you answer. Because if you miss this, then if you go back and listen again to the lecture, it'll help you notice what are the main sections. So first they talk about the meaning of slang, then they talk about why people use slang, and then they talk about ways that slang is created. That means the slang words that they use come from somewhere else. And I already mentioned briefly that sometimes it's a normal word that we already have, and they start using it in a different way. So one example, and then the last part is why is slang controversial. So you should make sure you have all those points in your notes. When my kids were in high school, when something was really great, my oldest son and my youngest daughter were 9 years apart in school. They're almost 10 years apart in age. And my oldest son, he and his friends would say something was awesome when it was really great. And by the time my daughter came along, when something was really great, they would say, that's sweet, right? And we use sweet to talk about sugar or candy, right? But they use sweet as an adjective to talk about something really great that happened. So even just in those 10 years, the teenagers were using different words. And so that's an example of words that already exist in English, but they start having a slightly different meaning depending on how people use them in the slang. So those are going to be your homework pages. I'll put it all on D2L. As I said before, I'm going to be grading your tests on Friday or Saturday so you can see your grades, and hopefully we can go through that on Monday. I can, once everybody's seen the test for the students, I can publish the grades. So I can grade it without releasing it for you to see because not everybody did it yet. And I'll also be reading your notes and giving you some feedback on your notes. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and that's what I want you to be doing. So everybody but Abdi's muted right now. If you have any questions, unmute yourself. No questions?
No.
So will you grade this page 113 F?
No, that's just to kind of, that's a way of helping you check your own notes to see if you found all the important information.
We will put the lecture on D2L, right?
Yep. Actually, both lectures, because there'll be a recording. The one we just listened to is only a recording. That's page 110. And then on page 113 is going to be a video recording. So it'll be a regular speaker again, that you can see the person and not just hear the voice.
Okay.
Any other questions? Is it easier if I put the video on YouTube like I did before? I think it's easier for people to watch it on YouTube than to have to download it. Because if I attach it to the announcement as a video file, in order to watch it, your phone or laptop or iPad has to download it. And depending on your internet and your device, that might take a long time. It's probably a 10-minute lecture this time. I can look at it.
That's true.
Let me see here. I can tell by the size of the file how long the lecture is. Yeah, the lecture is going to be probably 9 minutes long, so it would take a long time to download it. So I'll upload it onto my private YouTube page, just like I did for the test. And then I'll just put the link in the announcement so you can open it that way.
That will be easy.
I hope so. So we're only done 15 minutes early, but we didn't have our 10-minute break. So we did pretty much the same amount of class time, although we started a little bit late with waiting for students to log in. So it was a pretty full class time, and hopefully we covered a lot. So hopefully you can go back through the book and review it and review the vocabulary. And I did not talk about, I did talk about the definitions. So make sure you have all the right definitions and the parts of speech. I'll put up the practice websites for the vocabulary as well. So we're doing a big chunk of chapter 9 today over the weekend. But next week we've got to finish 9 and do 10. So hopefully it's not too much. Everybody stay healthy. I talked at the beginning about making sure you have a chance to get outside when it's nice warm weather. And take care of yourselves, and email me or use that phone number if you need anything.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody. I'll stay on a few minutes. If anyone has questions, you can stay on.